In 1970, Chrysler put the same engine in two completely different cars and told both of them they were the performance flagship. The Dodge Charger RT, 4,000 pounds of aerodynamic muscle, built around a body that Chrysler had spent 3 years wind tunnel testing for NASCAR homologation. Fastback roofline, hidden headlamps, a hood that stretched so far forward the driver could barely see the road from the cockpit. The Charger was Chrysler's answer to what a performance car should look like. Massive, dramatic, the kind of car you saw from half a mile away and already knew what it was. The Plymouth Cuda, 1,000 pounds lighter. A pony car body that Plymouth had borrowed from the Barracuda platform and turned into a drag strip weapon. No pretension about aerodynamics or road presence. The Cuda existed for one reason: to put the maximum possible force through the rear wheels in the minimum possible time. Everything else was engineering overhead. Both of them came with the 426 cubic inch Hemi, Chrysler's forbidden engine, the unit the company had originally developed for NASCAR, then homologated for street use in 1966, then watched as insurance companies raised premiums on every car it touched. Factory rated at 425 horsepower. Nobody believed that. Car Life tested a stock 1970 Hemi Cuda and ran 13.10 at 107.12 miles per hour. A stock Hemi Charger RT ran 13.68 at 104 miles per hour. Same engine, half a second apart. The difference was the car around it. This is the Dodge Charger 426 Hemi versus the Plymouth Cuda 426 Hemi, Mopar's internal war. The same engine answering two completely different questions about what performance meant, and two completely different answers about which question was worth asking. The 426 Hemi's history begins in 1964, when Chrysler's engineers built a race engine so dominant that NASCAR banned it. The original 426 race Hemi appeared at Daytona that year and won. Richard Petty took the first 3 positions, and the other Hemi-powered cars filled out most of the remainder of the top 10. NASCAR responded by prohibiting the engine entirely, because a racing series where one manufacturer's cars were categorically faster than everyone else's was not a racing series. Chrysler's response to the ban was characteristic. They did not develop a different engine. They developed a street version. The 426 Street Hemi, announced for 1966, was the race engine detuned to the level of reliability required for road use. A milder camshaft profile, lower compression, hydraulic lifters instead of solid, a dual 4-barrel carburetor setup rather than the race unit's more elaborate induction. The factory rating was 425 horsepower, a figure the automotive press understood immediately as a minimum rather than a maximum. Chrysler's engineers had tested the unit on dynamometers and found numbers considerably higher. The 425 figure was selected with awareness of the insurance industry's pricing structure. The Street Hemi was an option, an expensive one. In 1970, the Hemi added $871.45 to the price of a Charger RT and $871.45 to the price of a Cuda. The base Charger RT started at approximately $3,711. The base Cuda started at approximately $3,164. Buyers who wanted the Hemi paid the same premium regardless of which body they chose. What they got in exchange for that premium depended entirely on the body they'd chosen to put it in. The Charger's development story begins with Ford's 1965 fastback Mustang and Chrysler's subsequent recognition that the muscle car market was evolving towards style as much as performance. The Charger arrived in 1966 as a fastback 2-door on the E-body Coronet platform, a full-size car by any contemporary measure, carrying the bulk that full-size construction required. By 1968, Chrysler stylists had redesigned it into something that remains one of the most visually distinctive American cars of the era. The flying buttress rear pillars, the Coke bottle body, the long hood that gave the car its aerodynamic profile. That aerodynamic profile was not decorative. Chrysler had been developing a NASCAR program around the Charger, and by 1969, the standard Charger's aerodynamics had become a competitive disadvantage at superspeedways. Ford's Talladega had a lower front end. The response was the Charger 500 and then the Charger Daytona, winged cars with nose extensions and rear spoilers that looked like nothing else on an American road. The Daytona's wing stood 23 inches above the deck lid. It was required to clear the trunk opening. NASCAR required homologation cars to be street legal and produced in minimum numbers. The wing was therefore street legal whether you wanted it or not. The standard 1970 Charger RT was the road car version of this racing development. It weighed 3,988 pounds in base configuration. Before the Hemi, which added its own mass through the cast iron block and the dual quad induction assembly. The car handled the way a 4,000-pound car with bias ply tires handled in 1970, adequately in a straight line, with diminishing confidence as the corners tightened. The drag strip was its natural habitat. The quarter mile was the question it had been built to answer. The Cuda came from a different engineering premise entirely. Plymouth's E-body platform was shorter and lighter than the B-body the Charger used. The Cuda, the performance variant of the Barracuda, was designed to compete in the pony car market that Ford had created with the Mustang and that Chevrolet had entered with the Camaro. The brief was a compact, sporty two-door that could carry high-performance engines without being dominated by them. The Cuda's wheelbase was 108 inches against the Charger's 117. Its curb weight was approximately 3,400 to 3,500 pounds, depending on configuration. 500 pounds lighter than the Hemi Charger. 500 pounds was the Hemi's entire argument for the Cuda. The engine produced the same output in both cars, the same dual quad induction, the same 10.25 to 1 compression ratio, the same camshaft profile. The torque curve was identical. The horsepower peak was identical. The difference was what the engine had to move. In the Cuda, the Hemi was pulling approximately 3,450 pounds through the quarter mile. In the Charger, it was pulling 4,000. The physics were straightforward. Car life's 13.10 against the Charger's 13.68 was the physics made audible. Chrysler understood this. The product planners who had approved both cars were aware that putting the same engine in a lighter platform would produce a faster car. They approved the Hemi Cuda and the Hemi Charger anyway, because the two cars were not competing for the same buyer. The Charger buyer wanted presence, a car that announced itself, that had visual authority, that could be identified from a distance as something serious. The Cuda buyer wanted the quarter-mile time, a car that would win, regardless of whether it looked like it would. The production numbers reflect the market's response. In 1970, Plymouth built 652 Hemi Cuda coupes. Dodge built approximately 1,112 Hemi Charger RTs. Both numbers are small by any mainstream standard. The Hemi's price premium and the insurance surcharges it attracted put it beyond the reach of most performance car buyers. But the Hemi Cuda convertible is where the numbers become genuinely extraordinary. Plymouth built 14 of them. 14 Hemi Cuda convertibles in 1970. Every one of them is now worth more than most people's houses. The 14 convertibles exist because Plymouth's product planning process required offering the Hemi across the full Cuda body range, and the full range included the convertible. The convertible body, lacking the coupe's structural rigidity, was not ideally suited to the Hemi's power output. The chassis flex under hard acceleration was measurable and documented. Plymouth built them anyway because the option existed and some buyers were going to order it. Nobody anticipated that those 14 units would become the most valuable American muscle cars of their generation. By 1971, both cars were being legislated out of existence. The emissions standards that Chrysler had anticipated were arriving. The Hemi's compression ratio was incompatible with the low-lead and unleaded fuels that the Clean Air Act mandated. The 426 Street Hemi was discontinued after 1971. The last year for the Hemi Cuda was 1971. 7 units built in the final year, making them even rarer than the 1970 cars. The Charger continued into the mid-decade in progressively detuned form, but the Hemi version of the story ended with the regulations. The insurance companies had preceded the regulations. By 1970, the surcharges on Hemi-equipped cars had reached levels that effectively priced young buyers, the core muscle car demographic, out of the Hemi market entirely. A 20-year-old male driver insuring a Hemi Cuda in 1970 was paying annual premiums that approached the car's purchase price. The market for the Hemi was narrowing to older buyers with established driving records or to buyers wealthy enough to absorb the premiums. Neither demographic was large enough to sustain production. What remained after the regulations and the insurance pressures were the cars themselves and the documentation of what they had done. A verified 1970 Hemi Cuda with matching numbers trades in the $400,000 to $800,000 range in today's market, depending on configuration and documentation. The 1970 Hemi Cuda convertible, all 14 of them, trades above $2 million at documented auction, and verified survivors regularly set records when they appear. The Hemi Charger RT commands serious money in its own right, though the values are lower than the Cudas because the production numbers are higher and the collector conversation has concentrated on the E-body cars. The question Chrysler was answering in 1970 when it approved the Hemi for both platforms has a clear answer in retrospect. The Cuda was faster, the Charger was more dramatic. Both were correct answers to the question of what the 426 Hemi should be placed in, because the question was never which car was better. The question was what the buyer wanted the car to be. The Charger buyer wanted to be seen. The Cuda buyer wanted to win. Chrysler gave them both the same engine and let them choose. It was the most expensive $871.45 option in American automotive history, and depending on which of the 14 convertibles you managed to purchase and hold, possibly the best investment in the same history.